We are delighted to be continuing author readings via Zoom. We're thankful it's one of the easiest type programs that translates actually into Zoom. Um, and if you know of any authors, if you are an author and would like to get on the schedule, that would be wonderful. You can contact us either at info@bwlibrary.org or jody@bwlibrary.org. And we're happy to work that out. We're hoping to have them, once a month, every 3 or 4 weeks, whatever turns out to work scheduling wise for authors and the library. Um, in the meantime, we're excited to have Gene Christie here. Gene is not only writing his series of 5 books set in the, what would you say, the 20th century? Yeah.
That's right. It's the
Yeah.
20th Century Quintet.
Quintet. But he's a poet and a musician, and he's very well traveled, has lived other areas, and we're excited for all of the chat we'll have afterwards, as well as hearing him read some excerpts. So let me just see if I have everybody. I'm going to mute everybody, and then I'm going to unmute Gene. Okay.
Okay, I'm unmuted. You can hear me, Jody? Jody, I think you muted yourself.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I am going to mute myself because I have 2 wee beasties who live in the house and they're known to bark right in the middle of these. So I'll turn it over to you now. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jody, and thanks very much to Ellen Manley and my friend, the librarian Dawn, who was the first person that I ever met up at the Beckett Athenaeum, for having me here today. It's a great pleasure for me. Richard Wise from Virginia has just joined the group. Thanks for coming, Richard. And also, this will be the first time that I've had a chance to do a book reading since the original publication of the series began back in February of 2020. And if you can remember, before the lockdown, before the pandemic, back in January, we had a terrific book launch for volume 1 of this series that was held at the Liechtenstein Center for the Arts in Pittsfield on Wren Avenue. Many of you have been there. And we had great attendance, sold some books, autographed some books. And the plan at that time was to continue doing readings of that nature, especially since 2 more books were scheduled to come out from the series in the year 2020. Of course, for all of us, unfortunately, our lives were kind of derailed and constricted by the contingencies and necessities put upon us by the pandemic. So this is actually the first chance I've had to do another reading since that distant day last February, which actually seems like it was in another lifetime. But I know that Chris Nye was there that evening, and he will remember, and some of you others were there. So at that time, back on February 16th, the publication of the first volume in my series, which is called the 20th Century Quintet, was coming out on February 16th. I don't know, can you see this? Am I holding it up? Okay. This is volume 1, Arrivederci, New York. There's 5 volumes in the series. Each one is part of an ongoing family saga. If you like to read long series of books, if you like to read family sagas, then this series is for you. Um, the first book concerns a young boy of 10 years of age who comes alone by himself across the ocean to New York City. He's an unaccompanied minor. He's an illegal immigrant. And starting at the age of 10, he has to make his way in New York City. And this is his story. His name is Tony Lastoria, and he becomes the founder of the family, which is portrayed in the entire 5 volumes in the next 3 generations. So Tony is the founder, and I'm going to read from the back cover of the book so you get an idea of what volume 1 was about. It's 1899. An illegal immigrant, Tony Lastoria, just 10 years old, an unaccompanied minor, lands in New York and has to make his way in the world's greatest city. Overcoming every obstacle, Tony finds a partnership to last a lifetime in his friend Harry, whose family are Jews from Vilna in the cloth trade. Manhattan, the island, is the Bangladesh of 1905. Together in the wide open, unregulated garment industry of that explosive time, the boys manage to become teenage businessmen by the time they're 16. Harry plays the entrepreneur, and Tony his trusted floor manager. And the only thing that can ever come between them is a girl named Laura. And that's the story that you will find in volume 1, which begins the series. Volume 2 came out on August the 15th, and that's available. Both of these volumes are available on Amazon. This volume is called My Son the American. It continues the story of Tony in New York City, but the scene changes from New York to Boston. I can't really explain why without giving away the ending of volume 1. By the way, all 5 volumes have a kind of a blockbuster ending. So in the interest of what they call a spoiler alert, I don't want to tell you the ending of each book, but each one is a sequel of the one before. So you find out in volume 1, Arrivederci, New York, the reasons why Tony has to leave the city he loves, the city that he strove to come back to and to make his home in at such great effort coming from the south of Italy. In volume 2, here's what happens. Volume 2 is My Son the American. Tony and Gigi are 2 young people coming from very different places who fall together in the embrace of passion. It takes one kiss, but even before that kiss, they beg to agree never to share their secrets. Gigi sees them with children, 9 children. But on their wedding night, a knock comes at the door. Will the ghost of Laura Antonelli permit their love? The scene is the North End of Boston in the dramatic days of the Great War, the molasses flood, the flu pandemic of 1918. Then the turbulent 20s test them with the trials of Sacco and Vanzetti. And next, the Depression challenges their very survival, only to bring them to the brink of World War II. Will Gigi's prophecy of 9 children come true? Can Tony make a lasting peace with himself in spite of loving 2 women? Will their son, the American, survive the Battle of Salerno and his return to Alta Villa, the place where his father began? And that's the story of volume 2. Volume 3, which just came out last Monday, is called The Heart of the Century. And in The Heart of the Century, we have the story of 4 of the people of the next generation. Tony and Gigi ended up having children, and the story of three of their children is told in The Heart of the Century. And, and so the four stories in The Heart of the Century are Andy's story first, Peggy's story second, um, Jerry's story third, and last is Augie's story. Peggy, Jerry, and Augie are children of the Lastoria parents, Tony and Gigi. Um, the new character who's introduced in volume 3, who was not present in the first 2 volumes, is Andrei Petrovich, also called Andy, who was born and raised in Appalachia in a town called Pershing, PA, in Fayette County on the banks of the Monongahela River, about 50 miles southeast of Pittsburgh. So he grew up in a coal mining community during the days when unions were illegal in the 1920s, during the days of the Depression. So the dramatic story of Andy Petrovich is told first in volume 3. What happens then is Andy, in order to get out of the coal mines, joins the Navy in the Second World War. And after traveling on his ship, the USS Ruby, across the ocean to on the Murmansk run, he's on a destroyer escort that's escorting the convoys to Russia. He then goes with his ship into dry dock in Boston. And when he's on a weekend leave from the Charlestown Navy Yard, he goes to attend the USO dance, and that's where he meets the young lady that he will end up marrying, who's one of the Lastoria's 4 daughters, Jerry. The 4 daughters are Peggy, Jerry, Mary, and Anna. And all 4 of them go to the USO dance, trying to get Jerry hitched up with somebody because she's the only unmarried sister left. She's the stay-at-home sister who is taking care of their ailing parents. And her 3 sisters are all married. So they're out to find her a man, and that's where she and Andy Petrovich first meet, at a battle of the bands at the Raymore Playmore Ballroom on Huntington Avenue, featuring Stan Kenton versus who was the other band? The husband of a famous actress. I'm forgetting right now, but anyway, there's 2 bands there, and that's the story of volume 3. So basically, volume 3 is the hub of the 5-volume series. And if you consider the concept of a triptych, where there's a portrait in the center, and then there's 2 flanking paintings which complement and continue and begin and end the portrait in the center. In my series, The Heart of the Century is flanked by the 2 volumes of Tony's story and the 2 volumes of the generation that comes after The Greatest Generation. And those 2 volumes concern the son of Jerry and Andy, who grows up to become the writer who writes all 5 volumes. And his name is Nick Petrovich. So volume 4 is called The Education of Nick Petrovich. And volume 5 is the Isle of the Blessed. Now, the story of the 5 volumes begins in Italy. The scene moves to New York City in volume 1. In volume 2, it moves to Boston. It stays in the United States for the Heart of the Century, except for a couple of battle scenes from the war. But then, by the time Nick Petrovich, who was the grandson of the original Tony, grows up, he meets a young lady who comes from Ireland. So the fifth volume takes place exclusively in Ireland when Nick and his bride, Sheila Blake, go to live in Ireland. And that volume 5 is an eyewitness account of the year of the Troubles in Ireland in 1972. So in my series, the series is about immigrants. The immigrants turn out to be citizens not of just one country, but citizens of the world. And that's why the title of the series is called the 20th Century Quintet. Um, the four main ethnic groups that are covered in the United States part of the story are the Italian Americans, the Jewish Americans, the Irish Americans, and the Serbian Americans, because Andy Petrovich, that's his ethnic group, the coal miner who comes from Pennsylvania. But then the scene shifts to Ireland in the final volume. And for those who are members of any of these ethnic groups are interested in their stories, each volume is built around a love story between two people. In volume 1, it's Tony and Laura Antonelli. In volume 2, it's Tony and Gigi. In volume 3, the love stories are between Jerry and Andy, and Jerry's sister Peggy, and Rings Romano, who's the owner of the Frolics in Revere Beach. And in volume 4, in the education of Nicholas Petrovich, when he gets to college, young Nick meets a young lady from Ireland. Her name is Sheila Blake, and their love story is told in volume 4. In volume 5, the reader discovers what happens ultimately to Sheila and Nick. So that's a kind of a summary of everything that you will find in the volumes. And at this point, what I would like to do is read a story, a self-contained chapter 3 from volume 3, The Heart of the Century. And the scene in this story is the coal mining community where young Nick Petrovich, at the age of 6, is a child growing up in the impoverished Appalachian community where his parents, who came from Serbia, have resettled to work in the industry dominated by King Coal. And the time period of chapter 3 in volume 3 is 1923. The reason I selected this chapter, I think, will become obvious, because just in the last couple of weeks, we have witnessed the miracle of modern science regarding the COVID-19 vaccines. And it will become obvious as I read this story, the connection between then and now, and the connection between the miracle of modern science and the miracle of Saint Sava. Saint Sava was the patron saint of the Serbs, and that's the title of this story. So I'm going to flip to reading this story now. Chapter 3, The Miracle of Saint Sava. The time came when Tamara Petrovich felt the heaviness of the water buckets she was carrying nearly tip her into hopelessness. "Stop," she said to Andre. "I can't go one more step." He was 6 years old now, and he did not want to put his water pails down. He had learned it would be harder then to pick them up again. His mother looked at him with a moist despair. "What's wrong with your brother?" she wanted to know. "I've tried everything. I'm at my wit's end." "He's sick, Micah." Something dreadful was now truly wrong with Alexander. The house was thick with calamity. I have no money for the doctor. What am I going to do? I don't know, Mama. Have you prayed to Saint Sava, Andre? Did you pray last night? Alec wouldn't even let me sleep. It's in God's hands now. We need a miracle. Come on, let's get home. His mother was big with child again, and she tired so easily. They now had four at home. A girl they named Anastasia came after Alec. Andre was thinking, only God knows what comes next. A new baby was to him a once a year occurrence, like spring rain. They had reached the front steps. These were as forbiddingly steep as a pyramid. Andre put his buckets down. Mama, he's only 4 years old. Children don't die, do they? Don't say such things. But say it or not, there was no way around thinking it. Not when you recalled that just a month ago everything was fine, or as fine as it ever got. Life was a daily trial for them. No one expected struggling to suddenly evaporate. The poorer you got, the further you fell behind. But this went beyond everything. And it came on so suddenly. Everything was the same with Alec till about the turning of the new year of 1923. The first thing they noticed was that his personality seemed to change overnight. Sudden storms of temper derailed him, followed by gusts of remorse and self pity. When they questioned him, they heard Alec's complaints of being hungry all the time. That was the first hint. Now they began to watch. He was hungry again as soon as he finished eating. Well, they were all hungry. Potato soup, boiled potatoes, mashed, it didn't matter. Nothing filled him up. Tamara made him moussaka specially, though she had no eggs for the custard on top, so she used flour instead. She ran up the bill at the company store buying blood sausage and sheep's cheese. She made stewed duvak for him on top of the stove. If only she had a piece of pork to put in it. She couldn't afford any of this. What about the others? They had to eat too. But then they noticed it seemed Alec couldn't stop going to the bathroom. Yet he was thirsty all the time and drinking pints and quarts of water straight out of the outdoor spigot down street, as well as draining every bucket in the house. He stopped playing. He was up and down moody constantly. You couldn't talk to him. He was picking on his sisters, hitting them. Even Adriana, who was bigger than he was and who slapped him back with her tongue, in addition to her open hand or doubled fists. Now he was losing weight, and by every sign appeared listless and despondent until the next outburst. He seemed to have gone from sloping downhill to falling off of a cliff. When their neighbor Stella came over to have a look, she said, Tamara, let me call a doctor. No, no, she said, I dare not spend the money. My husband can only get 2 days a week as it is. The following week, it seemed to Stella the boy was worsening, and she put her foot down. My friend, my dear, you must. If it was a fever, I would bathe him. If it was a cold, he would be over it by now. I just don't know what to do. Let me get the pastor's wife to help. To do what? Pray for him? God doesn't listen. Not to pray for the boy, to pay for the doctor. When Dr. Logan was finally in the house, they all gathered round the groaning Alec in the bed he shared with Andre upstairs. Even their father, Milan, roused himself out of his daytime slumber to hover over the circle of faces. Tamara, the two girls, Andre, and Stella. How long has this been going on? Said the doctor, as he turned on the faces accusingly. Never mind. There's nothing much I could have done anyway. It's the sugar sickness. He'll be dead by Christmas. They don't last long. Listen, you've got to stop loading him up with potatoes and no bread. Now I'm going to give you strict orders. No more than 450 calories a day. Stella, do they understand the word I'm saying?" Tamara had taken her other children by the neck and shoulder and was squeezing them like dish rags while Milan looked on wildly, and a piercing wail escaped his wife's clamped, anguished lips. The doctor grabbed Stella by the arm and pulled her out of the room down the stairway. "Goddamned ignorant people! You come with me. I'm going to write it all down for you. They've got to put this boy on a stringent diet. It's his only chance." At the bottom of the steps, he stopped Stella. He'll go, he'll go blind. He'll lose his limbs, first one leg, then the other. If he's lucky and doesn't have a stroke first. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to make you understand that you must make them stick to the diet I order for the boy. Tamara followed doctor's orders, but it went against every instinct a mother had. How could she deny Alexander? It was so hard to see him in actual tears from the pain of hunger in his belly, while she kept food from him, the same food she shoveled out to his brothers and sisters. Every time she turned her back to spoon feed her 1-year-old, Stasia, a fight would erupt between them. And always he grew thinner. He was wasting away. She was killing him. He was starving to death. She was ready when Father Constantine's wife, Marta, offered to come over and pray for him. Little Alec kept his back turned. While they all trooped into his bedroom, he faced the wall. They grouped around the bed and fell to their knees. Andre and Adriana were frightened. They were old enough, not like little Stasia. They had to help their mother to her knees because she was now near her time. Marta Jovanovic, the priest's wife, held out a crucifix over the boy's bed while she slowly swayed back and forth, reciting. Milan peered over her shoulder. There was no room left for him to kneel. You could feel the pity as thick as incense in the little bedroom under the roof beams. And something else, a sense of doom, an emotion like footsteps approaching. Tamara blamed herself. To her other woes, she added this: if he had not been born, he would not now be suffering. Why did God take the feeling between man and wife and turn it to sour ashes on their tongues? What had she ever done to deserve this punishment? She was about to do it again, give birth. Was God going to take that one away from her too? The day came when she went into labor. Now that Dr. Logan was involved with the family, he insisted she go to hospital to have this one. But they no longer lived in Shawnee, where the Germantown Coal Company had their own wood frame clinic. Here in Pershing, there was nothing. The nearest hospital was 10 miles off in Uniontown. Dr. Logan was afraid that he would not get her there in time. After all, this would be her fifth. He took her in his own flivver. The rest of them, Tata and the children, with Stella too as interpreter, all trooped out to the McConnellsville trolley stop to wait for the streetcar to Uniontown. Dr. Logan had taken the dying Alec also in the flivver. Because the mother was on the verge, he did not disclose to her any of his plans for the boy. But Tamara knew. A mother always knows. Dr. Logan was busy, bothered, nervous, and in a hurry and worried, so it barely occurred to him to explain. Beside which, had he wanted to inform her completely, she wouldn't understand a word. Tamara's head lolled back and forth in the speeding, rocking vehicle. 10 miles of dirt road up and down hill did not spare her any jolts to the spine. She dared not open her eyes as it made her want to throw up. But she could not escape the dread and insistent feeling that while she was being driven to her destiny, her poor, innocent, blameless Alec was being driven to his grave. At the Uniontown Hospital, everything was white if it was not antiseptic green. The light was white, the nurses all in white, the doctors white. But Tamara could only see red, blood red, and that red blood only in her mind's eye, pouring from the stump of poor Alec's leg. She knew they were going to take his leg. That was the very reason why the American doctor had told her nothing. Compared to this pain, the agony of childbirth was bearable. To lose a child in his sleep, to lose a child from drowning, from anything, that was something awful. Yet you could understand that the poor little one was beyond everything, that he was spared. But to take his leg before you killed him, to make him suffer to live yet not to walk, to make him look down and have to see every day, every hour, every minute, the place where his leg used to be, that was torment. That was the work of the devil. And where was God while the devil did his work? The day after she delivered her new child, which she had long since meant to call Adam if a boy, and Angela if a girl, Tamara woke in her hospital bed drowsily. They had given her something that put her out completely. She was only dimly aware of all the people in the room, waiting for her to come back to them. As she woke, she tried to focus on them, but thoughts of her dreaded appointment with amputation overwhelmed her, and she was sure that this was why they were all there. They must be afraid. I'll jump out the window, she thought. Maybe I will. Maybe I should. Oh, I can't stand it. How can anyone live like this? Mama. It was her boy, Andre. Mama, we have a new sister. Adriana, come and show Mama. His sister held up the newborn for their mother to see. Andre said, "Isn't she beautiful, little Angela?" His mother, Tamara, felt only desolation. She waved her hand. Then she noticed Marta Jovanovic and Stella and Milan too. Where was that man, Logan? Why wasn't he here? Why were they all smiling so idiotically? Oh, this white light. What have you all done with my Alexander? Mama, Mama, Mama. It was Andre stroking her hand. Listen to me. I have to tell you something. Marta leaned over. It's something wonderful. Stella said, we couldn't wait to tell you. They all urged Andre on. He patted his mother's hand. It's something brand new. It's called insulin. They get it from a pig, Mama. Mama, he's going to be all right. Tamara looked back and forth at all their faces. She peered into their eyes to see if they were lying. It was true. You mean? She appealed to Marta. Marta took her hand next. Yes, yes, he's saved. Oh my God, I take it all back. They were laughing, giggling even. The joy was bubbling in their eyes. Tamara gripped Marta's hand as if she would crush it. She reached for Stella's fingers. She looked over their shoulders to find her husband, and when she did, she found him with eyes cast down to the floor. And when he looked up and saw her, those eyes were full of tears. It's a miracle, then. She looked at Marta. Yes, it's a miracle. Robin O'Haran, I see you there. Thank you so much for coming. And Linda. Hi, Linda. Well, that's chapter 3 from volume 3, and it's an example of how I tried to write these stories. Um, you know, I'm a big fan of uh, Gore Vidal, who wrote that amazing series of historical novels, 7 of them, which he called the American Chronicle. It started with the story of Aaron Burr. Then he went on to Lincoln, Lincoln, and 1876, and all the way on up to the Golden Age, which was about World War II and the 1950s. But of course, Gore Vidal, his novels depict another level of society because he came from a prominent family. His grandfather was the blind Senator Gore from Oklahoma. He grew up in New York and Washington. He was inveterate party goer. The people that he depicts in his novels are the politicians and their families and the leaders of society. My books are not like that. They're about the common people who, without someone to chronicle their ups and downs, trials and tribulations, would escape notice by the rest of the world. So my function as a novelist is to come along and breathe life into history by showing how the great events of the 20th century intervened in their personal lives. And that's what I've tried to do. And so I hope you enjoyed chapter 3 from volume 3. Jody, should we open it to questions?
Yep. What I thought we can do, because there are quite a number of us, and to unmute everyone at once could cause a bit of confusion. So if everyone who would like to ask a question or to speak, as you want to take your turn, either raise your hand if you're on video, and I will gradually add you in, or you can message on the chat. And if you don't want to ask the question yourself, you are welcome to just send me the message and I'll ask it for you. Okay. So let me get everyone back into gallery view so I can see you. Who would like to ask Jean a question or comment?
I saw Marie and Robin raise their hands.
Okay. I'm having trouble unmuting Robin.
I just
Oh, there.
unmuted myself.
Okay.
I just want to say it was so well read, and what a moving chapter you picked to read. It was amazing, and I can't even tell you. I'm really excited about the whole series, and I just want to thank you, Jean. It was beautiful, really well done.
Well, thank you. That means a lot coming from you, Robin. You know, my friend Robin O'Heron is a Delta blues artist. She's the young lady I call the Bonnie Raitt of the Berkshires. So she may be well known to some of you, and it's just great to see you here today, Robin. Thank you so much for coming, and I'm glad you enjoyed that story.
I did.
I just wanted, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you also. We're in Virginia, in the country. We wish we were up in Beckett, but we haven't made it there from November a year ago, I guess. But you just brought us all to life, and something that the modern medicine and everything. It was just a perfect read, and you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. It's great to see you again.
Thank you.
Well, we have a
Okay.
bunch of people want to ask
Christopher
questions.
Nye, I just unmuted, I think.
Yeah, I had a question
Okay.
for Jean. That was great, Jean. Really enjoyed it. Can you talk a little bit about how the writing process is coming for volumes 4 and 5?
Yes, I'd like to do that. I'd be happy to do that. While we have Chris Nye on screen, I'd like to tell everybody that Chris Nye, who's the chairman of the board of Orion Magazine down there in Great Barrington, and has been a professional editor for so many years, was instrumental in the birth of this series of novels, which I have been working on for 7 years. When you go back 7 years, back to 2013, I was in a writer's workshop moderated by Chris Nye. And for 2 years, the first volume and second volume of my series, great contributions were made by the members of that workshop, that writer's workshop. And I owe a great deal of credit to Chris Nye for that. He's the guy who brought me to that series. He was the reason why I was there. And I stand by the writer's workshop process for novel writing religiously, because I feel that it is a foundational method of developing the literature that we need in our country. As you know, the poet Shelley called writers the unacknowledged legislators of the human race. And during this intense time that we've been through this year, we need those writers to show us the way for the soul of America. And as far as the work that needs to be done on volume 4 and 5, which are due to come out in 2021, it's true to say that I worked on revising and polishing and proofreading 3 volumes this year. So I actually ended up working just about every day of 2020 on these books. And there's more of that in store, because volume 4 and 5 need some work to be brought up to the level of the first 3 volumes. And I stand by the first 3 volumes. I think that 7 years ago, when I was in Chris Nye's workshop, I was an amateur. And in the 7 years that I've been working on this series, I had to learn to professionalize myself. And my goal was to show competence and to get published. And I was fortunate enough to be able to achieve that kind of a goal. And I'm just thrilled to have all of you folks reading these stories, because I think they're the story of our families, our lives, and where we came from. So yes, there's a lot of work yet to be done on volume 4 and 5, and I expect in 2021 to be working every day on those. So thanks for the question, Chris.
So could I just add one point? That
Yes.
this was a poetry workshop that Gene was in, but because he was so, had so much promise and talent, and the people were so entranced by his chapters, that we let him stay in the poetry workshop and work with his fiction. It worked out pretty well.
And that's another reason why I have to thank you, Chris.
So, Gene, this is Ed Inicelli from Bristol, Rhode Island. I guess
Hi,
what
Ed.
I'd like to, I'd like to know how you started. Did you start with characters and then develop a plot, or start with a plot? And the second question is, I'm sorry that I don't know enough about your background, but could you tell us a little bit about your family? and their arrival to the United States?
Yes, thank you for that question, Ed. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this is a bookmark
Okay,
made for volume 1. And there's another bookmark for volume 2. And so I'll just read from the bookmark about the author. Eugene Christie is a novelist from the Berkshires. His maternal grandparents came from near Avellino in the south of Italy. They were named Antonio Scioscia and Giuseppino Fabrizio. And that was the origin, Ed, of my story. The people that I portray in my books were people that I knew personally. I did things such as create a chapter about the wedding night of my grandparents, Tony and Gigi. Of course, I was not there. So that fiction, that turned out to be fiction. That had to come out of pure invention. What little I knew about my grandfather, Antonio Scioscia, was that he had come alone to New York City by himself at the age of 10. And of course, when I knew him in the 1950s, late 40s, 1950s, he was at that time entering his 7th decade. So he was about 60 years old when I remember him. We had a very close relationship. He used to take me by the hand every Sunday to the St. Anthony of Padua Church in Revere, Massachusetts, which is a beautiful church built by a colony of Italian stonemasons who had settled in Barry, Vermont. And it was built as a replica of a church in Siena, Italy. So that's the family background which gave me the origin of my story. To answer your question about characters and plot, yes, I started with the characters. No, I didn't plot anything. My intention was only to originally write a short story about the reasons why Tony came to New York by himself when he was only 10 years old. And I first told that story to one of the people who's attending today, Marie Gormley, over at the cafe, which was then called Bellissima Dolce in Pittsfield. And when I noticed that Marie accepted my story verbatim, as if it was real, although I had made it up, I said to myself, you know, I should try writing that down. And that was the origin of the 5 books. Then my next task was to figure out, once Tony got to New York, what happened next? And so I just crept along from there without thinking about plot, focusing on the characters and trying to tell their story. And you know what happened was eventually the story started to tell itself, and the characters told me what should happen next, what I should describe and portray about them, what was important to them, what they were excited about, what they were incensed about, what their sense of injustice made them tell me I had to write it down.
Thank you. Great answer.
Thank you for that question. That was a good question, Ed. I see Richard Wise over there has got his hand raised. 1 finger, 5 fingers.
I know, Chris, that that one chapter from volume 1 of the quintet was published in an Italian-American newsletter. And I believe, one of the chapters from your yet to be published, I guess number 5, set in Ireland, was also published by a college literary magazine. You know, you mentioned that the chapter you just read was standalone. I wondered if that was scheduled for publication anywhere.
I'm glad you asked that question, Rick, because the truth of that chapter that I read to you guys today was that it was rejected 14 times. In case any of you out there think that it's easy to
good
get
then.
published. What's that?
I say it must be good if it was rejected that many times.
Well, I really believed in the story. I hope everybody who listened to the story today thought it was a good story, but I could not find an editor who wanted to publish it. And this was all going on in 2020 at a time when the high price of insulin was an issue that was the subject of hearings in the United States Congress. And yet, I could not get any editor from the New Yorker on down to the Massachusetts Review to publish a story about the original discovery of insulin and how it impacted the awful childhood disease which type 1 diabetes was at the time. And it was taking children's lives. And the actual discovery was made by a couple of doctors up in Toronto, Canada. And just like last week when the COVID-19 vaccine was approved and began to be distributed, within 2 weeks of the publication of the news about insulin coming from Toronto, it was being distributed all over the United States, all over North America, and the rest of the world, because that's how desperate doctors were at the time to help these children for whom they had no cure. And so it was a medical miracle. And yet in 2020, in spite of everything we're going through with COVID-19, I could not find an editor to publish that story.
Amazing. I wonder how they managed to do that insulin distribution without the Donald's help.
I don't know, maybe by oxen cart? I don't know, Rick.
Hard to believe it could be done, really.
Well, actually, if you research the matter, you will find that it was a very rapid turnaround in the treatment of diabetes, type 1 juvenile diabetes, which is still one of the major diseases afflicting the American population and worldwide. So God bless the doctors of Toronto. And thanks for that question, Rick. That was spot on.
Do you have a cover for your just published volume 3 to show us?
I wouldn't be able to show it to you right now. No, not today. As soon as I get a hold of a copy, I'll be able to hold it up to the screen like that. But at this point, I can't.
Okay.
Is that Marie?
Hi, Chris. How are you? Hey,
Hi,
Janet.
Marie.
Good to see you too. And Anita, it's friends on my thing here. Chris, I just have to say, volume 1 and volume 2, you know how much I enjoyed both of them immensely, to the point where I was so anxious when I finished volume 1, I couldn't wait for volume 2 to come out. So now, did you say 3 is out already?
Yeah, yes, it came out last Monday, Marie.
Okay.
So it's now available on Amazon.
Okay. All right. Very good. And I know our friendship goes back a long, long time, and we've, shared different tales and stories over the years. And I think I relate to yours, even though There's a little bit of Irish in there with my grandparents, both sets coming over from Italy and coming into this country and working hard and surviving and raising their family and everything that they had to go through. I think it kind of hits home a little bit, you know, from there. So for that, I'm appreciative. And your dedication to writing these, you know, I think has been very beneficial for those people who have read your books, and for those who will read your books, to be able to learn a little bit more about how things were way back when, you know, and to
Well-
think that they gave up so much and came with nothing and gave themselves a good livelihood, even though with the stress and the strain and them living in the little apartment in New York with how many there, and, you know, going through, I don't want to say too much for people that haven't read, you know, the volume 1 or volume 2 yet, but yeah.
Don't give away the endings, Marie.
no, well, you know how I was at the end of volume 2. I couldn't wait for 3 to come out to kind of see what happened. So now I've got to get volume 3 ordered and, you know, kind of go from there. So keep it up. Are you considering another series, not necessarily, you know, along these lines, but another series of stories to come out?
Well, I just haven't gotten that far yet, Marie.
Mhm.
I really have to focus on revising, polishing, and proofreading the final 2 volumes. I have a lot of confidence in the first 3 books that are now out because I worked very hard on them, but not for that reason. I really feel that anyone who reads these books, I'll put it to you this way. In volume 1, the task I faced as a writer was to portray not just the characters,
Mhm.
but the scope of a 10-year decade, 1900 to 1910 in New York City. And once I had done that, I sat back and I said to myself, you know, I'll wager that anyone who reads these chapters about New York in that decade will swear that that must be the way it was. And of course, I was not there. I had to invent much of it. I did considerable research, but the portrayal of the city in that decade, I stand behind.
Right.
Gene, if you all, when we get to travel again, if you haven't been to the Tenement Museum on the
Exactly.
Lower East Side of New York, they've recreated those
Mm.
tenements,
Yeah.
Gene. And then if you want to walk down the street a little bit, Professor Joseph Schelze has just reopened the Italian American Museum, a marvelous building with lots of stories of immigration, not just Italian, but it's the story that you're writing. It's great.
Mm.
Well, thank you, Ed, for that.
Yeah.
We're glad to know that. I just want to add that I wrote my portrayal of New York City without ever having lived there and without ever having visited those museums or seen those tenements myself.
That's a creative writer, able to sit in your room and then make your story. That's a real writer.
That's what your job is.
Yeah.
And believe me when I tell you, Ed, the 7 years for me were well spent because it was truly a labor of love.
It's emotional too, isn't it, Gene?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great.
Ed, I want to say we've been to those tenements in New York
Yeah.
City. You do get a true feel of
Yeah.
what life was like for those people, you know,
Mm.
who lived there. The small apartments going up the stairs, so many living in one place. Yeah, it's well worth it once everything is over. Yeah, to
Now, those
visit.
tenements, they have toilet facilities in them and running water. The ones that the crowded immigrants came to, the Hispanic and the Irish and the Jewish, had none of that.
That's right. That's-
In the 19th century. No.
Yeah.
Marcy Stearns, I see you there. Are you still there? Say hello, Marcy.
Hi, Jean. My camera isn't working,
Oh,
so you don't get to see me, but I am here.
I
And
am so glad you came.
As always, you brought those characters to life in such a few words, and yet, I was drawn to her feelings and knowing what she was going through. I hadn't experienced it myself, but it's amazing. And yeah, you have done some hard work. I was thinking that after 2021, you might want to take a little break before you start your next work.
Thank you, Marcy. I'll take that advice. Marcy's been a fan of this series from the very beginning. And if anyone wants to join the Jean Christie fan club, just contact Marcy.
Jean, again, maybe I should know this, but do you have a website and or a blog that you write?
I have a website and a blog, but it has all to do with music. So one of my projects for the new year 2021 is to update my website, which is at jeanchristie.com, to reflect the books that are coming out now. Unfortunately, I didn't have the time to get into that this year because I had to keep my nose to the grindstone on trying to perfect the printed paperback editions. That was my first goal. I also recorded the first two volumes, and that took me a month each. So the month of I think it was February or March was taken up with recording volume 1, and then in the month of June I recorded volume 2.
So you have audiobooks, Jean?
Yes, I have audiobooks. If you go to
Good
Amazon,
for you. Good.
by the way, the cover price on these books is $22.30. Go and buy them on Amazon because you'll save some money. You'll get a discount, and I want you to get the discount on volume 1 because I want you to buy the other 4 too. So save yourself a little money, but get them from Amazon. If you like the books enough to put a review on Amazon after you've read it, please feel free to do so. I would really appreciate that. It helps a lot. Ed, I'm glad you were here today. Your questions were great. And I wasn't sure until you said your name, how to pronounce it. I'm sorry.
Well, it would be Janucilli.
Yes, I like that.
The way the
Janucilli.
Italians would say it. I say
Yes.
Januccelli because it gets so misspelled. It's not
Yes.
that hard, just a lot of vowels.
Yes, I love that. In our family, on my mother's side, the family name was Shosha, and it was spelled Scio Scia. And you wouldn't believe how people would look at it and try to say, is that Skia? And
Well, the major league catcher in the Hall of Fame he says Mike Ciosa.
yeah,
But
is
it's
that
Shosha.
right?
It's Shosha.
He's a cousin of ours, you know.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he's from the Philadelphia, New Jersey branch of the family. But of course, he migrated out to the West Coast, Mike Shosha.
Yeah.
And for years, I watched him on television. He looks very, very much like my uncle Augie, who's in volume 3. They look like twins. And my cousin Linda Mihalis is here today.
Yeah. Can you
and
hear me,
she's-
Chris?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I
Yes,
just
go ahead.
wanted to
Tell us.
interject on that because I ended up getting a personal letter from Mike Shosha's mom years ago. And she did say that out of all the letters she ever got about Mike, that she really thought that our family, we were related. So that was really exciting to know. And he does look like a Shosha. He
Oh,
does
yes,
resemble the Shosha boys,
Yes.
you know? But Chris, I don't have a question. I'm just telling you, as a cousin, how proud I am of you and what you have accomplished, honey. We're really so proud. I
Well,
just
thank you,
want to
Linda.
let you know that you've put a lot of hard work into this over the years. And to see that you're being recognized for this is beyond words for me. And you know how much I love you.
Well, I love you too, Linda. And, every day that I worked on these books, I was writing them for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I told you, my grandson wrote his book review on the first novel on your, so I'm just letting you know. So, but we're very proud, very proud.
I'm thrilled. Thank you so much. You've been my biggest supporter all down these years.
And I always will be.
Thank you,
God bless
Linda.
you.
Does anyone else have any other questions they'd like to fit in today? Yeah. Jean, I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your books with us and your reading. I'm looking forward to diving in to reading it myself. Yeah. We also, one of the things I didn't think to mention at the beginning today is we have the Berkshire Taconic Foundation to thank for us being able to do our programming. So keep an eye out for additional stuff being scheduled for 2021. We'll have more author readings. I can already tell that someday in the future we'll have Jean back again because I don't think after this series he'll be done. Not with this kind of a fan base and not with his enthusiasm. It has been so nice to see faces from far away that we don't get to see very often this year, and fun to see new faces. Again, please share with other authors in our area that we love to have readings, and eventually they'll be in person again with cookies and beverages and all the fun stuff to go along with it, as well as the library surroundings. But for now, this is phenomenal to enjoy an afternoon with you all.
Thank you so much for having me today, Jody. I have one question for you. If people are interested in seeing the recording of this, how could that be done?
That we will have on our website. We'll have to be editing it because the meeting started early, so there'll be some cutting at the beginning and stuff like that. And then it will be mentioned in one of the next newsletters as well. So if anyone wants to sign up for our newsletters, just go right on to beckettathenaeum.org and you'll be able to ask to be on our email list. But it'll also be shared, through the website, Jean.
So that's how they find your website, beckettathenaeum.org.
Yes. Yep.
Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. And we share a lot of things on our Facebook also. This one would be hard to really those social media we put information out. And and Ellen just reminded me, everyone who signed up for programming ends up on our newsletters automatically, so you're all set that way.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Bye,
Merry
Chris.
Christmas, happy
Bye,
holidays.
Bye-bye.
Have a safe and healthy winter.